in Total Man, Stan Gooch made an analysis of psychosis, which is psychosis has been reclassified as autism, and so what we see of the the autistic spectrum is actually what used to be called psychosis, and it was perhaps more easily definable back then because there was a lot less of it, a lot less psychosis. Now, psychosis can be, or Gooch describes psychosis in Total Man as the dissociation of one's self from one's feelings or emotions, or in more general, one's nature. So one's attachment to nature and towards nature, the viscera, bodily functions, the sort of fear of all of these, of this side of life. So the detachment and dissociation from one's feeling side, one's emotions, one's bodily functions, and the reclassification of all these things as sort of dangerous or troublesome, I suppose. Now, back when the classification of psychosis was diagnosed more, the world that Western man had built around himself was much more suited towards Western man's needs and desires. And so family life, home life, work life, social interactions and such were much more in keeping and natural to Western man. Since the end of World War II, we've seen a complete reorganisation of society, and it's been reorganised to be more System B type, or System B dominant, less dominated by the ego and more dominated by the self. This has also been to do with the people in charge of the establishment and the influx of people from the third world who are predominantly more System B minded or natured, which has driven society towards that sort of System B and away from System A. So we're seeing a sort of general shift away from this side, which was System A, which was Western man for all of Western man's history, and we're seeing a shift past the centre towards System B. And we're seeing this in every aspect of Western life. It's not a good thing, because there's a reason why we were predominantly System A driven and organised, and that's because the majority of people in the West are System A dominant, which means that they're dominated by ego processes. And yes, it wasn't the ideal situation to be dominated by System A, but for the most part it worked. I'll touch on the system A dominance thing later on, and why we've ended up with a situation where we find system B has been brought in. But in terms of reclassifying psychosis, nobody wanted to be told that their child was a psychotic. It had too many negative connotations, and slowly it became reclassified as autistic spectrum and autism. Now, if we take the original point that psychosis was essentially a fear of nature, or a fear of system B, they reclassified psychosis as autism, and as a result, more and more children are placed on the spectrum of autism, which is, as Stan proposes, involves two factors. So the first factor is that the children are predisposed genetically to system A dominance, and then the parenting and socialization is predisposed to a certain type of parenting. So there's two parenting styles that Stan points out in the book, and Stan was actually a celebrated child psychologist. He wrote a couple of well-known books on child psychology for the Bureau of Child Care or something back in the 50s and 60s. I'd worked with a lot of heavily disabled children, both mentally and physically, so I'd seen lots of different examples of behavioural problems with children. And his conclusion was that there was two styles of parenting that led to psychotic children. Obviously, again, the child has to have a predisposition towards psychosis, or what they would call autism now. The first style of parenting is the detached parent. So the parent who shows very little attention towards their child, doesn't hug them, doesn't give them a sort of grounding upon which they can build a personality. And so this forces the child to sort of close off certain parts of the personality, such as the emotions, because they don't get any proper emotional expression from the parent. So then they learn through this socialization that emotions are unwanted or strange to them, or unfamiliar, and they become unpracticed in emotions. This is maybe something that you might see in, say, the upper classes, who have nannies or wet nurses for their children and then send them away to private school at the nearest opportunity, which could lead to, because if the child's predisposed to it, which could lead to a psychotic child, or a child that registers now on the autistic spectrum. And again, psychosis is only a degree away from psychopathy. They're both on the same scale of behaviour. You know, one is obviously worse than the other, but they're not completely opposite behaviours. They fall in the same range of behaviours, of human behaviours. The other style of parenting is the parent who treats the child like an experiment. So the operant mother who rewards behaviour, remains quite cold and detached from the child still, and treats the child more like a pet or some kind of experiment, in that they reward behaviour and, you know, things like grades and skills are rewarded with that. There's no sort of love shown until the child achieves something, or until the child reaches a certain stage, and they talk about how, you know, my child was so quick to learn to walk, my child was so quick to stop crying, my child was so quick to learn to use the potty. All these sort of goal-oriented parenting, which takes the sort of again, you know, takes the love out of the child's life, and teaches them that they're going to be rewarded for operational goals, which is, you know, like a Skinnerian operant conditioned child. Pretty much how you'd rear an animal is by rewarding positive, you know, so you're reinforcing positive behaviour with rewards. So these were the two styles of parenting that Stan had observed in psychotic children. Both of these styles of parenting are quite prevalent today, and not just in parenting, but in schools and the workplace and everything. Is that it's a much more mechanized version of parenting or child rearing, and we see it in factory schooling, where children are rewarded for achieving goals, and just in society in general. And this has driven a sort of a move towards a more sort of psychotic society, as Stan points out in Total Man, and I've done another video on the psychotic society, and that is a result of these genetic components that we find in the West, in people in the West, which is that they are more system A dominant anyway, and the parenting has become systematized and institutionalized, and so it's driven children more towards a psychosis, which is why we find such a rise, or why, you know, I would speculate this is why we see such a rise in autism and children being registered on the autistic spectrum, is because they're being shut down emotionally. One of the arguments that the anti-vaxxers have for not vaccinating children is that children become or show signs of autism immediately after vaccination. Now, one possible explanation for this, and I'm not a pro-vaccination at all. I don't think that you should have to supplement the human body with anything. It's, you know, you're a great human being, and you shouldn't need any type of scientific or technological intervention in order to continue being a whole, you know, a total person. But the children that that are vaccinated are possibly having some kind of break, an emotional breakdown, because of the failure of the parent, or the feeling that the parents have failed to care for them properly or protect them against the big bad doctor putting a needle into their arm and injecting them with God knows what, and perhaps this is all felt unconsciously, is that the child's body is reacting to these foreign agents being injected into the bloodstream, and it's creating an immediate emotional severance, so a psychotic breakdown that is almost irredeemable. And we do see these parents are they're not very hands-on with the children. The times that I see autistic children screaming and shouting and nobody gives them a hug, nobody interacts with them, people just see it as, the parents are a particular type. Definitely the parents that I've experienced with autistic children, they do have a particular style of parenting, or they're a particular configuration of personality, in that they are very hands-off, or they are very scientific, or have a tendency to pass off the behaviour to somebody else, maybe a doctor or a specialist or somebody who knows more about their child than them. And I think that this is felt by the child on an unconscious level, underneath the ability to be able to explain to the parents, because they're only children, they don't have all the words they need to be able to explain their intense and complex emotions at that time. So there's autism may be a sort of anger, so an inability to process the complex emotional feelings that come from being passed off to a doctor and injected with God knows what. That the child, unable to process this intense emotional experience, goes into an anger, and the anger remains unresolved for as long as the parents continue to display to the child that they actually have, one, no love for the child, and two, no control over their own lives, leaving the child in a state of constant fear and anger. Because what does a child need more than anything? It needs a steady, constant parenting that makes them feel secure and loved. And in that position, they can then explore the world safely. This is borne out in Harlow's experiment with the wire-framed monkey, where the baby monkey is able to explore the world properly if it knows that it has a base that it can go back to, that is a security blanket of a parent that it can go back to and live fearlessly, knowing that there's always something secure to look after it. So this inability that System A has always had to face up to its own System B. So Western society has been organised around the System A, which most people in the West predominantly are, but they also, because we're a hybrid, we also contain System B, which gets pushed into our shadow. And this reluctance for System A to accept that System B has a life, a need, or a desire to exist leads to us displacing our system B onto other people. And the people in charge, the establishment, are obviously the most extreme form of this system A dominance. So that's why we find higher rates of psychopathy or, psychotic, autistic spectrum behaviours in the establishment and the elites and the people at the top of Western society. And they're the ones who are least able to accept their system B. They've severed themselves from their emotional and visceral body and their natural self so much that they've driven our society towards the brink of destruction. And rather than face up to their own, so the solution to this system A dominance would be for each of us individually to embrace and nurture our system B, which is our unconscious. It's pushed into the unconscious at the moment. It's a shadow. We see it as a shadow. It comes out in our horror and our fear and dread and all the rest of it. But there isn't anything horrible or fearful or dreadful about it. It's just something that we, as system A people, as ego-driven people, we can't accept. The ego can't accept that the self exists. The self at least has some recognition that the ego exists. But the ego, in its, because the nature of the ego is dominance, it has to be the only thing that exists. So by denying the self in all of us, we're creating a world that is psychotic and psychopathic, ultimately. And then the most dominant of the dominant people, so the elites and the leaders of the establishment, are the most in denial of their system B. And as a result, instead of them facing up to this denial, they are bringing in people who are more system B, such as people from the third world, and they're trying to integrate them with us. So this forced integration that we're seeing in the West is actually an inability for the elites to be able to accept their hybrid nature. They've been pushed towards psychosis so intensely that the only way they can see to resolve this split that's in them is by bringing in people who are predominantly system B types and force integrating us with them. And then they, in their mind, the minds of people like Kalergi, is that this is all that's going to create the perfect human, is by mashing together system A people and system B people, and that should create some ideal person. But then they're incorrect. I mean, this is all driven by their own psychosis and subsequently psychopathy. And until we can all accept that, and the power and how powerful that unconscious motivation is, we are doomed to be kept in this permanent state of genocide. Essentially, is that we are helping to genocide ourselves by not accepting who we are, because until we can accept who we are, we're going to constantly displace that onto other people and use other people to deal with this hybrid nature of ours, rather than facing up to each of our individual hybrid natures. So rather than recognizing rather than recognizing that thing in ourselves, we're going to look for people who are something like the part that we're missing and bring them into our lives instead. And the elites are doing this on a really extreme level, by taking System B people as a symbol and force integrating them into a System A society. And until they sort themselves out, which they're not going to do because they are the most in denial out of everybody, we're pretty much doomed under these elites. But if we can do the individual work and accept and embrace our own hybrid nature, then the process will trickle up, really, because we only have these elites in the positions they're in because of our need for this sort of this dominance hierarchy. And those who display the greater dominance will obviously take the top positions. And we're all looking for somebody to be able to organise our lives for us so that we don't have to do the organisation ourselves. So by not taking on the self-organisation and individuation process that we need to take on, each of us personally on an individual level, we're allowing somebody else to do that organisation for us. And this is the basis of politics, is that we give these people the right to organise our lives for us, and even to religious leaders and even God. You know, the psychological desire for God is that somebody else is there above us organising our lives, and that we don't need to take any real responsibility because this other big being is going to take responsibility for us. And that's how we've got ourselves in this position, is that we've allowed people who were raised by bad parents. They're genetically predisposed to be psychotic, and then they're raised in a psychotic way by psychotic parents, which is then nurtured in society. And then we place these people above us all and allow them to control our lives. And their solution to the unconscious problem is that we are a hybrid. So the problem is that we have two natures and these need to be integrated. Their solution to that is to bring in a group of other people and literally, mix us together. But that is the problem in the first place, is that we are already a hybrid. So we don't need to add to the problem. What we need to do is recognize the problem. And it's not a problem, it's actually a form of evolution. So the hybridization is the grand form of evolution, is that when you hybridize something, you come out with a new species immediately. So this is actually what we see around us when we look at people are looking for signs of evolution all the time, and people say there's no mention of evolution in the Bible. Now, there is a mention of evolution in the Bible. There's lots of mentions of evolution in the Bible. In the Bible, they talk about hybrid evolution all the time. The most famous being the Nephilim, or the sons of gods and the daughters of the earth, and that creates a hybrid. We've got the mixing of different types of animals in Gomorrah, I believe. And so there are and even when Noah's flood happens, because there is no pure forms anymore. They've all been mixed. So we do see evolution in the Bible. It's just that most people don't think of hybridization as evolution. But it's only with hybridization you get large evolutionary changes. Small evolutionary changes are possibly occurring all the time. We don't know, but there is no. We don't see these small evolutionary changes until we see something big happen. So we either need a catastrophe, such as an earthquake or a ice age, or these sorts of great catastrophes that some geologists and evolutionists love to fantasize about, that there's going to be like a great catastrophe, and then what that leaves behind is a few survivors, and each of these survivors then goes on to form the next species. But there's also hybridization. We can see that immediately. Humans can create hybrids. We've seen hybrids. We've created hybrids for thousands of years. We've domesticated animals through hybridization. So there's a form of evolution that exists in front of our eyes all the time. And so why should it be any stretch of the imagination to think that humans are a hybrid, a cross between two previous types of pre-humans? But it's a good thing, because that's how life moves forward. But the ramifications of it psychologically are very, very hard to deal with for everybody, but this is a process of moving forward, and until we can conquer this one great problem. Like I say, it's not a problem as in we need to eradicate the problem through transhumanism or genetic engineering or any of the other ways that the elites think that we can eradicate the problem. So we can remove the system B from system A. That's what they're going to. That's what they're going to attempt to do. They're going to either replace parts of us with technology, which will be transhumanism, where they eradicate aspects of system B, such as sleep, pain, emotions. Finally, eradicate them with robotics or computers. Or they're going to genetically engineer out the aspects of system B that are troublesome, again, such as sleep, pain, as we can see recently with the RNA vaccines. They're attempting to engineer humans to not be able to be susceptible to viruses. Even though some people will say that the immune system is, I heard this quote the other day, the immune system is literally made up of viruses that have fought other viruses and then remained in the human body. So some people, general normal thinking is that the immune system is made up of viruses that have been integrated into the body, and yet they're trying to create an RNA vaccine that will retrain the body to fight viruses. So that's the way they're going to try and get out of the situation that they feel like they're in. But what they really need to do is face up to what it means to be a total human being, and that is that you are both system A and system B. So we need to do that work on an individual level, and we need to stop allocating this important job to other people who claim to be better than us because of their education, or claim to be better than us because of their association with God, or because of science, or whatever it is that they claim makes them more qualified for this job than us. Then no one's more qualified for the job of self-individuation than we are. you.